You're listening to Traumedy, the podcast that helps you take your pain and play with it. I'm Nancy Norton. I am a comedian, a registered nurse, and a certified humor professional in therapeutic humor after 3 years of study in the Humor Academy with the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. I go around and share the power of humor. Coming up soon, I will be in Dallas, Texas for the School Nurses Association, and then doing Nurses Off the Charts at the Dallas Comedy Club, May 25th. That's May 25th. There's also a Nurses Off the Charts show, May 19th at Comedy Works South in Denver. Oh, gosh, June, we're going to bring Nurses Off the Charts to Juneau, Alaska. I'm going to be in Juneau, Alaska, June 14th. That's Flag Day. Tickets are already selling fast, so that's pretty cool. All right, here we are at Nurses Off the Charts, and I just found out I have a groupie.
This is my fourth time seeing Nancy. I love her so much. I laugh so hard I cry. I'm a hospice nurse, and I'm just so grateful for all the work she's doing to keep nurses laughing and happy and healed. And healed! We're healing the healers! So.
Hospice! Oh, I love hospice. My favorite job was working hospice, not just because nobody gives a shit about the med airs. I think I mentioned I gave myself 2 levothyroxine today. Seriously, I'm a very intuitive nurse, but I also have ADHD, you know. I know what you need, but I forget to do it, so. My nickname is Incident Report Norton. Here comes old Incident Report Norton. How many of you have saved somebody with CPR by applause? I want to hear your story, your story. You saved someone with CPR? Look at me with my good eye. Where were you? Tell me the situation. Did you do it?
Ambulance.
You were in an ambulance.
Yeah.
That's cheating. It's cheating, man. I want to hear a Walmart story. If you want to send me a message, you can do that through my website, nancynorton.tv. TV like television. Follow me on Instagram, nancynorton.tv. We are going to be firing up the Traumedy Instagram pretty soon. But for now, everything's on nancynorton.tv. This week's guest I interviewed at the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor Conference in Denver. Welcome to Traumedy. My guest this week is a professor of philosophy, the CEO and founder of Mirth Management, and a speaker here at the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor Conference, Dr. Michael Cundall. And you're also are you part of the Illuminati? Or
yes, I'm one of the members of the Illuminati committee.
I love the Illuminati. I love that. There's so many puns around here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to take seriously. We were just talking about, like, how seriously can we take all this research? And that's one of your specialties, is about research.
Yes, I try and keep up to date on stuff and you know, have my work informed by good research and produce good research and that sort of thing.
Well, welcome and thank you for participating. I started this podcast as part of my second year Humor Academy project, but also as a bit of a calling. I'm in a recovery program for adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And as part of that program, we turn our will over to the care of God, whatever you want to call, you know, higher power. I feel called to do it. Like, it's helping people. I hope it's healing me to do the podcast and talk to people like you who have taken humor and help people.
And I do that same sort of work, but I do it through my little Substack where I kind of write on various different things relative to, you know, mostly to humor, but every now and again other things. But I committed to doing once every 2 weeks this year, and I've been pretty good about it because last year I thought I'd do every week and it just turned out to be too much, you know, writing to in addition to all my other stuff. But I really enjoy it. That's one of the ways that I work through my issues and kind of work through some of my ideas is to write them out because that's where I'm strongest.
Are you talking about on your blog or just for yourself, like in a journal?
Oh no, this is for my blog. Yeah.
I just subscribed. I just subscribed to your blog, so I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited. How do we find your blog? Where is that?
If you just look up, you know, Dr. Mike Cundall,
okay,
and Substack, you'll find me.
And I will put that in the show notes. I'm pointing down just so people know, even though we're not on video. It is down below the podcast. You'll see the show notes. That'll be a link to is that on your website?
Yeah. So yeah, you can. I also have it linked off my website, themirthmanagement.co.
Okay, great.
Shameless self-promotion right there.
Yeah, no, but it's really an offering. It's a wonderful offering. And part of the thing we want to do with Traumedy is help people. So many people that are trauma survivors get isolated and they feel like they're the only ones. And may I ask you, before we go to that, what on your blog is, what is your background and what do you think made you funny? Do you have any insight?
So I've always appreciated humor, and my mom has a wonderful sense of humor. It's irreverent and disrespectful. And that's where it came from.
Oh, that's great. I'm so jealous.
Kind of my background. And then I just saw other people when I was in high school who were funny. And, humor just seemed to come easy to me. I remember when I would ride the bus to high school in like my sophomore year, and I would have to take one of the buses that took all the people who commuted, to downtown Cincinnati. I was in the back of the bus, and, you get to know the riders, and I'm this 14-year-old kid. And I sometimes had them just laughing, just hysterically laughing. And I was like, okay.
You had a captive audience.
Right. I was totally captive.
And it was a bit of a commute, it sounds like.
Yes, it was about 45 minutes on the bus.
And so so this became a thing where they were like, tell us a story. Was it like a story time or?
All I can remember is I had them all laughing. I made some sort of face to punctuate the joke or whatever I was, doing. And I remember very clearly a woman just saying his facial expressions are so good. And, so I've always found a way to use humor. When one of the earlier speakers was talking about, we want you to be quiet in class. You're too disruptive. And, my mom, I remember adults and parents saying, no one likes a class clown. And I just always found that false because people seem to love a class clown.
Yeah. I have to say, not the teachers all the time, although there were those rare teachers that really knew how to use the class clown, like me, and you were a class clown.
Yep.
And do you, when you became a class clown, I guess I always think it's a sign of a stressful childhood, but it doesn't sound like in your case, it was just
Oh, no, I probably should be in that group with you because, one of my parents, my dad has, alcoholism issues and there were all sorts of fun stuff. And I've never actually used my humor to deal with that. And I don't know why, because I've had people say, maybe you ought to try and go and do some bits about that. You'd explore some of why it is so bad with humor. And for some reason, and this has been in the last year or two, I just haven't found ways to make it funny. I don't talk about it. And I've talked about it with my, significant other and all that sort of thing, but I've never really found a way to get my comedy hooks into it. I can't say it's right or wrong. I just never have.
But just not yet. It's maybe not there yet.
Right, might not be.
And as you start, you said you're gonna do you're gonna do some stand up coming up pretty soon. You got your second time doing stand up.
Yep.
And as you get hooked on stand up, which you will.
Yeah.
Which you probably already are. You might find like that it will start coming just because as you start to have that resource of like, oh, I've got an outlet, I've got an audience, I've got a way. I don't know. It just, for me, it didn't come out. It came out in more cartoony ways. And then sometimes it comes out more direct. Nowadays, I'm a little more courageous with it. And I love to cartoon my pain, and I do little jokes about drinking out of those little airplane bottles. And I'm like, you ever drink out of those little bottles? You ever ask for a little paper sack, put over your Jim Beam, just throw it back, and like, you ever start buying rounds on the, I'll buy another round for my entire tray table.
It's Fireball for everybody.
Yeah. Just give them that little imagery to go home with. That's one of the things I've wanted to do with Traumedy, is to do it live where I have a panel of comedians. We have people who are ready to process something and looking for a joke. Like, comedians do this naturally, that we can take your pain and play with it for you, and then we co-create a bit with you. That's a little bit of a resource where, like, say you're getting triggered into a past memory, you can kind of pull that out. Like, you could pull that little memory out of your hat of like your dad.
It's kind of like the advice where they say, think of everyone in their underpants if you're going to go, public speaking, that old line. You're finding a way to defang the memory or ridicule the memory so that it takes away some of its power.
Yeah. But doing it with comedians where you can take it to the next level.
Oh, where
You know?
they use their skills. And like, you've never thought of it in this way.
Yeah, and they just have different styles too. Because like I have some friends that are so dark and so irreverent, and then I try to maintain this certain uplifting energy while I'm being ridiculous. I kind of use visuals a lot, like that, imagining that. But anyway, it would be different. Like which ones work for you? You know, that would be the thing we would do. I don't know, but we could. Hey, if you want to co-create something about alcoholism, we can go for it.
I mean, there are some, funny like they're funny, strange. I've been thinking about how and the sorts of jokes that I want to do, and I really enjoy when this group that gets together as part of this little class, and they're all advanced comics, and I got let in because I had written that book.
Yeah, all right.
They're like, okay, you can come, and I find myself, at least at the moment, enjoying the writing more, like just the playing around with the ideas, and so
that co-creativity.
Yeah, it's so much more enjoyable for me. One of the gentlemen in the group, he has a stutter, and so a lot of his material has centered around stuttering. And interestingly, he was coming up with something, and the bit was, he was like, I want to donate my vocal cords, like donate organs, but to some unsuspecting person so that they have to deal with this. And then like, yeah, when you go when you stutter, it's like, oh, I'm just buffering. And I thought for a second, and I said, that's what you do. That's how you open your show.
Yeah.
You just say, well, I have a stutter, and don't worry when I start this is a stutter. It's just me buffering.
Yeah.
And it was, so he started with the buffering idea, but it was targeted at someone else, like in the joke construct. And then I was like, but if you use it against yourself, it's a funny little self-deprecating thing. And I said, and if you start your show with that little bit, suddenly you don't have to do any more work on stuttering jokes.
Yes.
You can free your bit. And he looked at me, he's like, oh, that's a good idea. I was like, yeah, man, I think that's a way to go.
That's a good opening. Yeah, I was picturing that shirt. I think there's a shirt that looks like that little buffering symbol on it, and then it says something like sarcasm loading or something like that.
Yeah, it would be the same idea.
Yeah, that's great. I love, because I work with a lot of comics with different abilities, and it's one of my dear friends, Christy Buckley, has cerebral palsy, but she's doing something different, and she doesn't do her whole act about cerebral palsy. I mean, she acknowledges it, and then let me be more than that.
Right.
And so that's pretty cool. I mean, I do some jokes about acknowledging my lazy eye just because two people will answer me a lot of times because I do a lot of engagement. So it's like, no, I'm talking to this person over here. Oh, hey, what's the name of your book you mentioned? I know I got it. I have short-term memory issues, and I'm like, what is the name of Mike's book?
So it came out almost 2 years ago to this month, and it's called The Humor Hack. And it's a book that I started it, and I jokingly refer to season 1 of the pandemic, that first summer when we were all starting to set in with the realization that we weren't going to be just home for 3 to 6 weeks. But this is apparently going to be much longer. Yeah. I just sat down at my dining room table, and I just started to type. And I think I came out with the first draft in, 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And then I followed some really good advice about hiring an editor, and that turned out to be just an amazing thing to have done. It made writing the book, and it helped develop it in ways that I could have never done on my own. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking of writing a book, when you can get editors who do kind of the grammar, spelling, punctuation, and then you can get content editors who look at your book in a thematic sort of way and say, oh, well, you could do this. And I always joke with people about when I was writing the book and going through the editorial process that no one ever asks a philosopher to say more. But there were 3 or 4 spots where he said, Mike, you got to say more here. There's some ideas that you have going on here that you need to explore more and explain more for your reader. And, the book then, grew by 25%. I increased its length by 25%.
By getting those prompts of him saying, because some of it you just feel like everybody might know, or you don't realize where, so he can present like, oh, wait, I don't understand this, or there's more I need to know about that.
Exactly.
What's the premise of the book? The humor hack. I love that you use the word hack because every comic is so terrified and afraid of being a hack. And then even when I think of a new idea, especially now that I'm in my 60s, I'm like, oh, did I hear that somewhere? I go around and ask people, like, have you heard this? Because, this came to me so easily.
Right.
I worry about hearing stuff and being a hack.
So the idea behind the book is to help people use humor to improve their lives, whether it be at work, it's in their, professional life, their personal life, all above. And it's really written as the genesis of the project. And when my interest in humor research kind of took a more applied turn was when I started to notice the high levels of disengagement that you see in the workplaces, and that this number has bounced pretty strongly between 70 and 80%, which just has always struck me as bad and wrong, because I think the communists and the Christians agree on one thing. We were put on this earth to do and make things, because the Christians say, idle hands are the devil's playground. And the communists, at least Marx, and when he was talking, one of the bad things about modern industrial work is that it separates you from your species being a maker. And so I think that they're right, that, our ability to create both in work and in other creative endeavors is important to who we are as individuals and humans. And when we ruin that by having awful workspaces,
and these, not only just these cubicles, but compartmentalizing the work so much that you don't get to see from the conception to fruition. Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure what you mean about the engagement set 70% down.
So a lot of people, so there's this idea of disengagement where people aren't, I hate to reuse the word, and they're not doing as well as they could. They're not doing as well as they should in their job. They're not feeling rewarded in their job. It's that kind of that 50-yard stare, blank.
Oh, right. Okay, now I get it. So they are literally either offline, or they're scrolling through Instagram, or they're spacing
doom
out.
Scrolling, or just, absenteeism, presenteeism, all those things.
I was curious what that meant. Okay.
And so I've been worried about that. And so I thought, and it struck me as odd that more people weren't using humor as a way to combat disengagement, because humor is such an easy way to become engaged.
Yes.
Everyone loves to smile and laugh and have a good time and enjoy humor. And I know that in places where I worked, where there were good levels of humor, whether it be playful teasing or someone who was funny or a leader who was funny, I wanted to go back to that job versus a place. And, I ask my students when I'm teaching, or ask people when I give talks, have you ever been in a place where there was humor? Yeah. Did you like it? Yeah. Would you go back? Yeah. A place where there wasn't any humor, it was not very fun, would you go back? No.
God, and that makes my stomach hurt. Just hearing that, for me, that's actually a deal breaker for sure.
Right.
But where do you go mostly? What kind of organizations, or do you have a specialty area, or do you just anywhere that they might need to?
Anywhere that they might need to. So I gave a talk to some accountants on how to make meetings more enjoyable through the use of humor. I've talked to the U.S. Army on leadership in the military and how good leaders use humor with a leadership bend. I've spoken to teachers on how to use humor in the classroom. So one of the strengths of talking about humor is that it will work in almost any workplace, because it's something people love. What you've got to do is just figure out what that workplace's jokes are. Do
you do like I do? I do a lot of pre-event interviews with potential attendees, and I love to hear, first of all, their nomenclature. I'm a lifelong learner, so even though I'm not in academia at all, I'm just a curious person, and I'm like, oh man, so tell me some of the nomenclature, the inside jokes that are already there, and then that goes a long way.
So what I tend to do, and this is partially because of how I've developed my personal sense of humor, I'm much more of a, what they would call a smart aleck, right? Where I'm just making jokes about stuff that happens, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do take stand up and do joke writing, because you have to create all that energy yourself to make the joke work. Yeah. Whereas if you're just making funny comments, you're just pulling from stuff that's already there, and it's a different skill.
Yeah, it's a different skill.
So what I wanted to do was learn how to do that kind of on my own. But when I go to organizations, the first thing I'm going to do is I actually just go to Reddit. And I look up that particular group, and I just start poking around to find out like the memes and stuff.
I did not know about this. So are you talking about that industry, or are you talking about that specific company?
No, the industry. So accountancy.
Yes. It is interesting to see what the inside jokes are already there.
And then what I do is I take that as part of my opening gig, and I said, so I'm a philosophy professor. I clearly don't know a lot about accountancy. So as part of my research, I went to only the best places on the web, like Reddit and other meme. And that, of course, gets a laugh.
Perfect.
But the idea is the memes are going to have enough there that I can recognize. And I might not know it precisely, but they're going to recognize it. And then the thing that I ask, the one way that I can get people to talk about things that they might easily joke about, I said, tell me what you gripe about. What are the things that y'all complain about? And I'm not talking about I need to be paid more. I'm talking about like the specific things that you gripe about as accountants. And once you get those, then you say, and then you have enough grounds to make.
I'm over here like carry the one. That's all I know. That's all I got.
Or there's something about accountants from what I remember that they're you don't want them to bring them to meetings because they know everything. That they're gonna just no, that's not gonna work, or no.
Oh, I married an accountant, dude. I was married to an accountant for 11 years, and he was the naysayer. I would have an idea like let's have a 4th of July pool party, and I know all these silly ideas like we could put little American flags in the sponges, and they'll be floating in the pool. And he goes, nah. The wind will put them all in one corner, just immediately. And I'm just like, I was just like, you're right. He was right.
He was right.
I know, but let me dream for 3 seconds.
Or at least let me have the experience to prove your point.
And I look at that like, well, that was, who the hell, what was I thinking? Little American flags on sponges anyway. I don't even like 4th of July. But so they are the people that just like immediately like, they just dial it into like, this is why this won't work.
Right. Or if you want to do this, it's going to cost this. You don't have this. We're done. Right. So,
there's no expansiveness.
Right.
Okay. God.
And so, how can you play with that? Right.
Yeah.
Are you the sort of person that likes self-deprecating humor? Okay, then you can roll with that.
Yeah.
But it's enough to get them thinking, right? Because I can tell jokes about teachers, things that I do. Or
you're inside teaching for sure.
Right. So I can say, well, when I do philosophy or I do this, so here the jokes are, I work at a historically black college or university where I'm, one of the fewer white people that are there, and my students will want to know, and this is a joke that I wrote, and I used to say, well, let's talk about the fact that I'm white, which is kind of that right in your face, and I would say, okay, let's talk about the fact I'm a white guy, and I'd play it up, and it was kind of that punch.
Yeah.
And I've developed a new way of saying it. I say, well, let's talk about the fact that I'm melanin challenged.
Yes, you are very melanin challenged.
Right.
I don't want to hurt your feelings.
No, it's totally true.
No.
But that little joke and the release that it gives, because people laugh at it plays around with self-deprecating, but no one's really melanin challenged. But it's that notion, and it's playful, and it's kind of. And then the subsequent discussion about it is much easier to get into because you're coming off of that lightness of the humor.
Yes.
And it's much easier to have a discussion that's going to have heavier elements.
Yeah, that's what it does. And, of course, I'm over here as a nurse going, well, actually, as a skin cancer survivor, and I've had to have a couple of not major, but 90-minute surgeries of taking skin from here and putting it over here.
Right.
I mean, I am melanin challenged for sure. But, okay. Now, let me just take all the fun out of your joke right there. Like, by the way, cancer. Okay. All right.
Right. Let's just go right into cancer.
You can count on me to lift up this podcast with some cancer. And, we do talk about that here at AATH. Oh, I love that you called it Athens. Like, we are Athens, and you said trademark pending. And I laugh so hard. But, some of it goes over people's heads. It doesn't mean it's not a funny joke. I just want to say. So everywhere you go, it's like they know they can find you as a Mirth management, which is brilliant because it is a great way to be a manager if you lead with humor, and especially the kind of humor. Well, I'd love to talk about the military because when I did these USO tours back in, this is how long I've been doing stand-up. 30 some odd years, but it was in the early 90s, mid 90s. So my dad cautioned me as I went on these tours, and he was saying that, okay, if you go in, make sure there's not mixed, if it's the officers club or it's the enlisted men's club. But if you go in and it's a mixed audience, he's like, there's this rank thing, and if the highest ranking guy's not laughing, then they're not going to laugh. I don't know that I really felt that, but have you found anything when you do the military training that they worry about losing their authority? Like, how do you maintain authority? I would love to hear this because I'm trying to coach people. Can I just steal off your ideas?
Absolutely, because they're probably not like most ideas. They're not wholly mine. So I did deal with that in a way. The example that I used in the talk was Winston Churchill, because he had this rapier wit, right? He could just crush you. He was that good. And so maybe he's a little too prickly, but there was one where I'm blanking on the person's name. So he had an opponent in, the House of Commons or the House of Lords, and he was prime minister at this time. And this
nemesis.
Yeah, something like that. Or this nemesis was coming. And apparently at this point, Churchill's having his constitutional. So he is otherwise occupied on the porcelain throne.
Okay.
And this
very eloquent.
Lord Privy, Privy is in the name of the Lord, which makes this story so
good.
much more ironic.
Yeah. My grandmother always called it the privy.
Privy, right? The Privy House.
Yeah.
So, somebody, Lord Privy, makes his secretary interrupt him while he's on the John. And he responds, apparently without missing a beat. And he just says, "You tell Lord Privy that I only deal with one shit at a time." and I was like, I said, I don't know about you, but if my leader is able to pull that off in that situation, like that's a person I want to follow.
Yeah.
Because it shows you how quick-witted they are.
Yes.
And he just absolutely torched Lord Privy by comparing him to excrement.
Yeah.
So, it was so wonderfully done.
Succinct.
And I think anymore, the idea that people will laugh with you and somehow you lose authority, personally, from my experience and the way I've dealt with students, and I've seen other, hierarchies where there are these things, it is less of a problem because we're a much more humor on the front end, or like we advertise that we like humor. Like it's actually bad to be looked at as someone who doesn't have a sense of humor.
We value humor.
We value humor
in our culture, and it is revered if you have a wit. I mean, that is true, and it depends because I have low self-esteem. I have low self-esteem, and I do self-deprecating, which is not putting myself down, but self-acknowledging certain attributes, the physical, whatever, lazy eye, or my ADHD. I just acknowledge all these things. So I'm kind of a goofball. I'm not sure I know how to teach a leader because I don't have the type A personality I am a single mom, and I am not the leader of my own house. Let me just say that. I have one child, and it's like, what do you want for dinner, honey? He's okay.
No, I'm trying to think about the self-deprecating, because this is something that I worry about. Because for someone like me, who's a white male, who's highly educated and has a level of economic, like I have all the privileges.
And such a cerebral degree too. I mean, philosophy.
Right.
Wow. I mean, because that to me is like the creme de la creme of degrees right there.
There's a worry, and I think it's a reasonable worry to have, that certain people in certain organizations and in certain situations, just in societally, when they make self-deprecating humor, so as a female, making a self-deprecating joke, even about your lazy eye, could net you negative effects in an organization because, women tend to occupy a lower rung. And I don't know how, I haven't worked this out yet, but there is something different about when you, like you're saying, acknowledge that you have this lazy eye, or you acknowledge that you have ADHD, not to make fun of yourself for it, but then, and you're not excusing whatever the behavior is, you're just kind of, like you said, acknowledging it. And it is this thing when people talk about self-deprecating humor in general, that it is some sort of acknowledgement of our shared humanity, that we all have foibles.
Yeah.
And that itself is important, because when you're in a strictly hierarchical society, there are times, and especially I use this as a teacher, when I can remove some of that hierarchy so that we're partners in a type of inquiry, or that I'm helping them get to this place that I want them to get to, that it becomes a much more effective learning environment. And I think that that's true in a working environment, right?
Where we are co-workers.
And co-creating the space.
Yeah. I get mixed reviews on it. I mean, I definitely hear from people, like on my Dry Bar comedy special, I talk about the gifts of ADHD. I mean, there's two sides to every coin. So I do try to talk a little bit, and I do hear from people with ADHD that, especially like kids, that it's a kind of a G-rated special, so kids can watch it, and they are like, oh, that really helped. I have a lazy eye. I have ADHD. Although it can also, there's other personality types that smell blood, and they're like, they jump on you and like, oh, they really will kind of mock me to my face, like, you really do. Oh, are you talking to me? And I'm like, okay, dude.
Right, but then there's an element of intent there, right? So I'm not intending to make fun of myself. I have this article that I gave a presentation on it, that I said, if you really look at it, and this is just me being a troublesome philosopher, I said, self-deprecating humor is not self-deprecating at all, because what you're doing is you're trying to make yourself look good in the eyes of the people by acknowledging this mistake, which is in fact bringing you up and not actually bringing you down. So the name itself is actually oxymoronic.
Yeah. And it helps me to not try and mask it. I actually, if I really concentrate, I can kind of pull my eye in, but I don't want to spend my bandwidth on that right now.
I've got a limited amount of time.
I'd rather just tell people, it's old lefty.
This is the one you need to pay attention to.
Or my third eye.
Right.
Because the Inuit say that people with misaligned eyes are the visionaries. I don't want to brag, but I've seen some shit.
Hey, work with it. Take it as it comes.
I'm a little bit psychic. I do use my intuition a lot. I don't know. A little bit psychic is, kind of that's probably an oxymoron. I don't know. A little bit. If you are psychic, I don't know. Well,
yeah, is psychicism or whatever you'd call it
psychosis? Well,
if
that's always debatable.
Right. Can this admit of degrees? Like, I'm only a little bit of a virgin.
Yeah, on the left side.
Right.
So anything that you want to share? Because I love this to be an organic conversation, but I also want to give you the opportunity to insert your wisdom that you've acquired over all these years. Is there something that you would really like people to know that may be either struggling with trauma or just maybe wondering how humor could enhance their life? Is there something that...
So when you mentioned what it was that this podcast is about and the traumedy and that's your work, and I was trying to think of trauma and how to deal with it and if I have experience with it. And, in my book, another shameless self-promotion.
Keep going. It's an offering.
Right. I point out, I said, I have a chapter on humor in emergency situations, and I say, I front the chapter and I say, right, so I'm a teacher and I'm a philosophy professor. Like, what emergencies am I really going to face? Like, oh, I can't think this hard today. Right.
The kid tilted back too far in the chair.
Right. I do face emergencies. So I have a lot of students who will come in and they'll be upset about their grades. And I have one example that I'll just push everyone to go see my TEDx talk.
Yeah.
If you want to check that out, give me a couple more likes and views. It always helps with those algorithms. I have an example. And
share it.
I have an example in there, but I have a different one. I had a student who, and I think I talk about this one in the book, but if not, no worries. She was a freshman, and like the first 6 or 8 weeks of school, like every other week, she had some huge emergency. Like the sky was always falling down. And I spoke with her because we remained friends after she graduated. And I said, can I use this story that I want to tell? And she said, oh, yeah, it's totally fine. So I'm down in the main office. And so she's my advisee. This is why she comes to me with all her problems. And at this point in the semester, I'm used to like every 2 weeks. Oh yeah, she's here. She comes. And so I'm down in the main office, and it's my boss, a couple other faculty, a student worker, and somebody else. And where she comes running into the office. I mean, bright red in the face, flustered, and she's like, Dr. Mike, I want to discuss my future life with you. And the whole room just, everything goes over to her, right? She just pulled all the energy, and everyone's just kind of looking around, and she is staring at me. And I said, well, sure, I'd like to have that conversation, but do you think I could talk to my wife first about it?
Yeah.
And because and she got even redder, but then she laughed, and then everyone else laughed, and then we went upstairs and had a good conversation. But that humor just kind of broke that moment, right? And it was, to her, an emergency situation, right? I don't get to say it's not an emergency. I just get to deal with the situation. And one other one, an example that I have, I was talking to a British military officer, and he said they were in Iraq, and, this is 10, 15 years ago, and they were ambushed. And one of the soldiers lost all or part of a limb. Mm-hmm. And I think it was an arm. But he's telling the story, and he said, I'm trying to get everyone back to focus, because if we don't get back focused and get together, it's over with. And he said, my soldier who had lost the arm, he's like, everyone's going, we got to get together, we got to move. And he said, I can't leave, I've lost my arm. And then one of the other soldiers just went, no, you didn't, it's right over there. And the person and the gentleman who was freaking out stopped freaking out.
Yeah.
And he just kind of was like, oh.
Snapped him out of it.
Snapped him out of it. And this is what humor can do so well.
Yep.
It can punch through the panic, because when we panic, we get so hyper-focused that nothing can penetrate it. And for some reason, humor kind of, it goes around it, it punches through it, or a combination of both.
I can't cite the article right now, but one of the things I love to talk about is how it takes all the major lobes of your brain to really get that joke. You can't be in that midbrain fight, flight, freeze response and get a joke at the same time.
Right.
So somehow he was in that panic mode, and then it's right over there, just like that. And that also happens in the midbrain, if I understand correctly, the involuntary laughter. So maybe it just, I don't know, I picture it like stirring stirring it up and
Right.
and expanding your awareness, and like suddenly it's like, oh yeah, back to
Right. Both times when because the audience clearly won't see what we're doing, but
Right.
when we talk about it, there's this shake, there's this quick shake of the head,
Yeah.
the eyes blink, and everything just comes back into focus without the blinders on.
Yeah.
And so you can use humor, and sometimes you might not know, right? That's the whole point. Like, the humor is going to do something that you just can't see, and sometimes that might help with a friend who's going to be able to point something out. So years ago, I was building a workbench, a really solid woodworking bench, and I had 110 inches long by 24 inches wide, 5 inches thick of oak.
Whoa.
That's the bench top. I love it. But it was a glue up. It was 2 pieces glued together. I was trying to put the top on the legs, and as I was doing the way I was told to do it, the glue line failed.
Oh no.
And I'm still somewhat of a mediocre woodworker. I'm probably still a mediocre woodworker, but I looked at it, and my brain just suddenly was like, and I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know what to do. I was completely, and my wife said that when I walked upstairs, and she said, I've never seen you so dejected and completely out of sorts.
This is a big project.
It's a big project, and I don't know how to fix it. Like, I'm like, I don't know what to do to fix this. So I posted it on a woodworking group with some friends. I just said, and a guy, and this is within 24 to 48 hours, and he comes back with a really good joke, and he said, and he immediately realized what he did, and then, immediately went back and said, I'm sorry, that could have been too soon. And I said, no, it was absolutely right, because what I'm doing is I'm obsessing on the situation, like, and the obsessing is not helping.
Yeah.
The situation is what it is, and either I fix it or I don't. So that joke kind of, yeah, it's funny, and that's all I can do, and I'm glad that I can laugh about it.
Yeah.
Because if I couldn't, it's probably really, really too bad.
What do you remember what the joke was?
No, I don't.
Oh, but whatever it was just
was
like
funny, and
it was
like,
hilarious. Some sort of table splitting thing.
Yeah, and he apologized for it. I was like, no, man, that was good job. Like, thank you. I needed that.
And that's one of those finessed things too, like when you're around, like when I was working as a hospital nurse, that my dad was appalled at some of the jokes because you're not there. You don't understand what we are.
Y'all in the medical field, you have some.
Oh, I love doing shows for nurses. I have a comedy show right now that I'm touring with called Nurses Off the Charts, where I basically half the show is me telling you stories why I should never have been a nurse because I'm intuitive. I know what you need, but I have ADHD and I forget to do it. But the other half is these nurses just telling these wild, funny stories. And I mean, like, I'm remembering this one doctor, we were doing CPR, and I usually worked ortho med surg, so it wasn't high acuity. Like, we didn't have very many codes on my floor. I've participated in maybe 2 or 3 over the years. But I think it was still in nursing school, and I was in the ICU, and this woman coded, and the doctor happened to be right there that has the light that looks in your mouth. And he looked down there and he pulled something out, and it was a beat. And he was like, oh, a cardiac beat. It was like, she's back and everything's fine. But it's a cheesy kind of play on words. But in the moment, it was
perfect,
what we needed.
Right. So when I talk to nurses and medical folks about using humor in the, and I have I'm much more tolerant and forgiving of that sort of thing. Because I don't know that world. Look, if it's the case that in the middle of all the craziness, all the raining fire, you find humor, and even if it can be really dark blue humor, right? And it gets you through the day and you're still doing your job,
yeah,
then I'm calling that a win.
Yes. And it doesn't hurt somebody else. Do it back in the nurse's station where you're not hurting the patient.
Right.
And also the thing back to what we were saying earlier about getting you out of that midbrain fight, flight, freeze response, you cannot think well in that state. And, they have those studies that prove you can do creative problem solving faster.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's such a benefit in so many ways.
Yeah. So I was pitching this to the North Carolina group that runs the continuing education for medical care folks. And one of the people on it, he said, I don't think that you're right. And I said, it's okay for us to have a discussion about it. I said, but, I just don't want you to knee-jerk reflexively just kind of think that any sort of humor that might be considered inappropriate is necessarily wrong. That's throwing babies out with bathwater. Now, there are, jokes, and if you're going to have a good working team, and this is where it just you got to be adults. If I make a joke that you find, I mean, that you understood why I did it, but you find it, then we have a conversation as colleagues and you say, didn't like this. And if I value you as a colleague and I don't want to harm your working environment, that's probably a thing I won't do again. But there are cases where people will work with others who they don't particularly like their brand of humor, but they also understand that this is how they get through their day. And anthology that I did on cases on applied and therapeutic humor, the one that's about medical care and humor in medical care, there was what we set it up as, it was a case study of either a medical care professional or a patient experience of or using humor in that area. And so we had this one with a patient, and he was a dental patient, and he said, I don't like my dentist because he keeps making the same jokes, and they're kind of bad jokes, and they're boring, and I just don't like it, and he shouldn't do that. And what we did is that was the case. And then we had people who are experts in communication or philosophy and humor analyze the case. Well, a philosopher was analyzing this case, a colleague of mine and a good friend, and he said, you don't get to tell the doctor not to be able to do that because they're probably doing it to make their day better. And it's important if they like how they do it. Those jokes aren't causing any harm. It's not making him worse of a dentist. You just don't like them. Okay, so you don't like them. That's the end of that story. There's nothing more to say, because while he is providing you a service, are these jokes interrupting the service? Are they making his service less good? If the answer to both of those are no, it doesn't seem that you have an objection.
Okay, can I argue this?
Yeah, please push back.
I want to hear these jokes because I have a bad feeling they're bad dad jokes.
Oh yeah, they're dad jokes.
I do think that puns cause pain. So I'm like, if you're increasing the pain, he's already going through a dental procedure. We don't need to compound the pain with some bad dad jokes that actually make you go, ugh, you know.
I think this is just normal cleaning, your standard thing. I don't think he does this when he's drilling it. Now I can't be sure.
Also, we don't want to make people laugh when their mouth is wide open with you're always trying to manage the gurgle in the back of your throat anyway. Like, suction before I laugh.
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was just like, I do. It depends on the pun, like I love the organic puns but man, I will say, I think ATH is a little pun heavy. I'm going to say it.
Sure.
I think we're a little pun heavy. I would like to see a little more irreverent and dark. Like, I would like there to be a little chapter, like, or can we huddle up over here and be the really irreverent, kind of dark, edgy, can we have a little, I don't know, another component where it's a safe space to
explore those things?
Yes, and alternative lifestyles and things that we're, especially people that do have a background in comedy where it just takes a lot more to make us laugh anyway. So it's like, can you just, because honestly, I got to tell you something. When you first said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I thought, okay, wow, is this an abortion joke loading? Because I was like, okay, bring it, bring it. Because I joke about everything on Traumedy. Like, I take my pain, my personal pain, where I've had a miscarriage, which is called a spontaneous abortion. I do improv with God, apparently. And it's like, yes, and the baby fell out. And I have, people will be like, oh, you shouldn't joke about that. I mean, it is the darkest, saddest thing that ever happened in my life. And I make jokes about it. And that's me.
Something that we all need to remember, and it's something I push in various places, is that when you're doing comedy, you're doing something different than using humor therapeutically. Comedians are doing comedy to get laughs. Like, you're filling a role when you're up there doing your bits.
Yes, but I will say personally, I've had a mission statement since I've started this, is like to help heal myself and others. So I do think there is some overlap for some of us who, maybe it's even just therapeutic for me. But then you'll talk to stand-up comics who will say, well, you shouldn't be using comedy as your own therapy, but that's what I do. So it is therapeutic for me as the teller and a handful of people who also may have had miscarriages or who have had other, things that I tend to talk about, which are a little bit, some of my stuff's really silly and some of it's very heavy.
Yeah.
So
part of the worry there just for me becomes, so if you bring up that joke and you bring that stuff to the table and you're doing it as part of, it's a way that you deal with it, but you also want to have others, enjoy the humor of it. There's a difference between offense and harm.
Oh.
So this is something that philosophers are worried about, especially when it comes to, so just to, perhaps bring up let's talk about a trauma from last year, right? From presentation.
Yes, let's talk
Okay.
about that. Thank
So-
you for bringing that up. I had blocked it out for not really completely, but yeah, it's.
As I recall, you were very unhappy, and
I was triggered.
yeah,
I had a midbrain response. I got absolutely triggered, like not in a healthy way, like as like maybe whatever it was. It was
severe.
It was severe.
strong.
There was a so we can I say like sort of what in my experience what was going on, and this is the interpretation that I took away. I was getting the message that he wanted to really separate out like actors who dress in drag are not the same as these people who are using like drag queens who are using it in a sexual way.
Cross-dressing versus drag. Right?
Yeah.
was the distinction he was trying to push.
And it felt, but it also, there was something else I wish I could remember because it was building, and there was a lesbian sitting right behind me, and I'm an empath. I'm gonna say it. She was slapping her thigh like this, and her energy was coming through my back, and I was like, oh, this he's homophobic, he's transphobic, and then that's the interpretation I took. So I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that's the message we were getting, is that he was like, that's not comedy.
Right.
That's using it. And he didn't even understand what drag is what we were both saying. And then I just was like, I have been around in the LGBTQ community for a long time and know that people have been harmed, do this kind of rhetoric does cause people to be killed, like
Yeah.
you're a bad person. So whatever it was, I got triggered into fight mode. I tend to go to fight these days. My inner teenager, Virginia Vengeance, I felt like I was protecting the woman behind me as well. And I was just like, and I just jumped to my feet, and I'm like, I'm not paying for this.
Right.
Like, I paid to come here and feel like my lifestyle or my community. And I do identify as she, they, non-binary, which is a part of the trans continuum.
Right. So
All right.
I
That's
think-
what I did.
yes, that's what happened, and the room felt it, and
Awkward.
I was up front at his talk, and he's doing, he's pushing this difference between drag and cross. He wants to assert this difference between drag and cross dressing, and I'm like, but okay, fine, but to what end? Like, why is you have to assume that one is bad and the other one's good, but you don't seem to have reasons other than that's what you believe. I didn't get to have those discussions, but other people were unhappy with the presentation because it mulched up all these, issues, and you were offended. So the question is, are you harmed? Now, I don't know for sure if you were or not, and that it's also an important case because as a member of who identifies as part of the LGBTQ community and that sort of thing, we know that certain groups can be harmed by jokes because they're members of ostracized communities, and there's this social weight.
Yeah. So
But-
how do we? Oh, go ahead. How do we define? Yeah. So you're going to
So
define
that's-
harm or offense?
That's what we're trying to figure. That's one of the things. Like, okay, I'm offended because I was offended by some of the things that he said, but I clearly wasn't harmed.
And I think, do you know what else? The other thing that kind of started the activation.
Right.
How with whatever it is, I would call it emotional pain. And the threshold with any pain, what I've heard is the more you get exposure, the threshold goes down. But I was getting activated too because he was, there's people in the comedy community that you just don't need to bring up, like Woody Allen. He's a controversial figure, and Bill Cosby.
Right.
He brought up both of those guys. And I was just like, why is he bringing up a person who has been convicted of a crime against women? And then Woody Allen, whose stepdaughter took out a full-page ad in the New York Times describing her,
the treatment.
the treatment from him. And then also he did marry his other daughter that he did co-parent. So it's a little, there's
It's
a lot. There's
creepy
there's
all the way
There's some
around.
creep factor. And I loved Woody Allen. I loved his movies. I was a huge Woody Allen fan. And now I'm like, oh,
Right.
it's just like Louis C.K. I know too much. And I'm sorry, I can't enjoy it anymore.
Right. So
But
there are questions
that's a
about
different subject.
how do you treat the art of troublesome people, right?
Yeah, it's another subject.
Part of what seemed to be the issue, it seemed, from last year was a sort of tin ear that going through this stuff and then not acknowledging the the ways in which this can be problematic to a variety of different people. So I was clearly offended. I can admit that I was offended, but I'm not harmed. You're offended. Are you harmed?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's not responsible that I have a trigger around, being oppressed. And, my mother, this is where I might cry because I've shared this before, and I shared it in a one-person play.
Right.
But so, okay, hang on a second. Just give me a second.
It's your podcast.
Well, but this is the traumedy, right? Where, okay, so the fact that I got triggered, I don't know that it's harm, but I haven't, wounds that got reopened. Is that harm? It's not his fault I have these old wounds.
Right. So that
it's not that he caused the harm, but, having a mother who was so homophobic and so narcissistic that my television debut, 1994, and I mean, it was a big honor. Bud Friedman, out of all the comics in Denver, and these guys were so, frankly, I thought funnier and more experienced. But that particular night, I was in my body, I was in the moment, and I was connecting with Bud, and I was talking to Bud because my dad's name was Bud, and I was just like, I'm really good at improv, and I was just being in the moment, but then I dropped into my stand-up, and I wasn't going to come out that night because at that time I identified as a lesbian. Now I identify as who the f*** cares? I mean, seriously, I'm so old. Like, am I even sexual? I don't know. The point is
unimportant
right now, right? For me. But I was just doing these jokes about being a lesbian. I'm like, I was married 11 years. Very nice man, but he would not wear the Jodie Foster mask. Like, I get this great honor. It's as a comedian, it was my dream as a little kid to be on TV, whatever.
Right.
That I'm going to tape that show. I think I'm heading to LA the next day. And I get a call, your mother tried to kill herself. Because I had told her I'm going to come out, and I'm worried there's a lesbian in Kansas that's about to kill herself, and that just came to me that I need to come out. And there's no one out. And when Bud invited me to come do the show, I said, I literally didn't know if I could say I'm a lesbian on TV. I said, can I say I'm a lesbian? He goes, oh, sure, just don't say fuck, because I think I dropped a bunch of F-bombs that night. Point is, that trauma of my mama trauma, that trauma probably got reactivated as
Right.
well.
And
but
so,
is that harm? I don't know.
and given the whopping minute and a half that I've had to think about it in a strong way.
I mean, what is harm?
Clearly you were feeling some sort of pain.
Yes.
But he didn't intend to harm you.
No.
Whether or not he knew his words might be harmful, that's a reasonable question, right? Because the topics are sensitive topics. It's as if, so at A&T where I work, I didn't know prior to working there that the phrase "you people" is not something that you say to African Americans. I had no idea.
And you had to learn that the hard way.
No, actually, I'd never learned it the hard way. someone told me because they were happily nice to me.
Oh.
And now what I do with my students is I will punch around that phrase, and I say, sometimes it's hard. It's a hard job to do sometimes. Because it's students and blah blah. And all jobs are hard. But I said, what keeps me coming back? And they're like, what? I said, you people.
Oh.
And so they want to be mad at it, and that's my point. I said, because I go meta on the joke right after I tell it. I said, you want to be mad at it, but you can't be because I'm using it in a nice way, and I'm saying that you're the reason I'm coming back.
Yeah.
And I said, and so
and they know you, and they trust
Right.
you, and they know your heart.
Right. And so it's me playing with that, right? But then I also need to know that my, the conversation that I don't have to have with my three boys about being pulled over and how to behave,
I know,
versus the conversations that my students have had with their parents,
I've had to have with my son, as he's a child of color. He's Asian, he's brown, but we had to talk
Right.
about not if, but when.
Yeah. And I said, and these are things that I need to be aware of as a person who's paying attention in the society, because I'm in society. And that's where you can say the harm wasn't intentional, but the harm could have been seen to come, right? It's this notion of, I think in the legal world, it's like manslaughter. Like, you should have known this was going to happen. So you're responsible. You didn't murder them, but you created the conditions under which they were harmed. Now, I'm not saying that what he did was manslaughter. That's clearly, it's a bad analogy.
No.
But the idea is that having the conversation about the difference between offense and harm is something that we need to have, because it will make these discussions much more productive. Because if if you could say I'm offended and then explain to this person, this is how it could harm someone like me or someone in this group.
Yes.
That's an open conversation.
That's great. And I think the way that if we did, and I know it's about time for closure here, and I thank you so much for taking this time.
Quite welcome. Happy to do it.
In between the conference and the banquet. And are you gonna dance tonight?
I've never
No threats. I mean, I'm not threatening you, but come on.
I've never really
No
done
pressure.
80s dance stuff, right? I was, in my younger years in the 80s.
You're too young for the 80s?
Yeah, I was too young for the 80s. Like, I can swing dance. I taught swing dance last year, but like the 80s ain't swing. 80s rock is not swing dance.
Modified.
Yeah.
You could see if you can swing to some Madonna or
Right.
something.
Vogue.
Anyway, thank you for working, your time in for me. I love this kind of conversation, and I'm an oral learner. I like to be around smart people. Bring it, I just want to get it in my brain.
Right.
I love these kind of conversations.
They're fun.
And the whole they are fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of harm. So I was thinking about that. If I had to think if there was any harm, but it got repaired. And that's what's so important. Because at that conference, what my therapist teaches me, and I do have one and probably always will, she says what's more important than the harm is the reparation, the repair.
Mm-hmm.
It goes, then actually the bond is closer.
Yes.
Once we have a repair.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like we had a repair. I felt heard. I mean, I was in tears. Some other people were in tears. Like one person was here. She's a psychologist. Her child is trans. And this woman that was behind me who I believe to be a lesbian. And then I'm all over the place. I'm at least 5 letters of the LGBTQ. I was in Mary Kay's face. I was like, I'm not paying for this. I can't believe I'm paying.
You were fit to be tied.
I was triggered. The next day, there was a panel discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And
You got to give AATH credit for responding in the way that it did.
I was asking them, they were going to have a panel about diversity and inclusion. And I said, do you have a representative from the LGBTQ? And they said, no. And I said, would you add me? And at first they were like, oh, it's all set. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just saying. I mean, I advocated for myself by the time I had de-escalated. If you give me 2 minutes, I can stick to my time. And
Right.
it was a wonderful opportunity to, and also talk to the guy who gave the presentation and say, look, I'm not into cancel culture. I'm into healing. I really am. Let's grow.
Right. And I think that was one of the nice things is that, it caused some people to have discussions that needed to be had.
Yeah, and I so appreciated it. All right. I got a little excited. It's almost time for closure.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that comes to your mind where humor has helped you through a rough patch? I always do this in my talks is I'll go around like, is there a running joke that you have in your family? Is there something that you have turned a stressful event into a comedy routine or into a running joke in your family? Is there anything like that comes to your mind that humor's helped you through?
I don't know about helped, but just because I use humor. So I've 23 years with my wife and partner, and what happens in relationships is that how the other person thinks, so she's going to see my jokes coming a mile away. But a couple years ago, I remembered our anniversary was coming up before she did, and I asked her. I said, "Hey, what do you want for our anniversary?" And she's like, "I don't know. What do you want?" And I said, "No. I remembered first. You have to. I started this. You need to respond." And so she took a little bit, and this just owes to how, clever she can be. She said, "Oh, well, this anniversary, I can't remember which one it was, is the porcelain anniversary. What do you think?" And I was like, so she quickly flipped it back to me, like, "Well, what would you think we should get for porcelain?" And I was like, "I don't know. What do you want, a toilet?" And she laughed, and I said, I still got them every now and again. I can still get you to laugh. And I've told that joke to, other married men. They're like, "Can we steal that?" I was like, "Go for it.
Go for it.
Take whatever you want. I'm not making any money off this. It's great. It was fun. It was and she
Take it
laughed.
to the next level. Add a
Right.
bidet.
Oh,
I said bidet, sir. Yes.
hey, look, I'm a big fan of the bidet.
Oh, tune in next week when we have the debate on bidet or no bidet.
There's no debate.
I had to think in the pandemic with the toilet paper shortage. I was like, hey, you can make an Ozark bidet. Just run that garden hose in through the window, run it in through the window, put the nozzle on flowers. Win. Mike, thank you, Mike. Dr. Michael Cundall. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. You can connect with him, see his TED Talk, get his book, hire him to come to your company to add more humor and engagement from your employees or from yourself.
Anyway, I'd be happy to do it.
It helps with job retention. When they laugh at their job, they stay at their job longer. That is well documented.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you for bringing me over and having me on.
We'll see you on the dance floor.
See you on the dance floor.
Bye.
Bye.
I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Michael Cundall, for taking all the time at the conference to talk with us about all these great concepts. And no, I did not recall seeing him on the dance floor, although I was sipping whiskey. I'll put a link in the show notes for Dr. Michael Cundall's website, Mirth Management. I'd like to thank my son, Nathaniel Norton, for providing the music for Traumedy. Come out and see us. Let me know if you have a guest or you want to be a guest. If you know somebody who should be a guest on Traumedy or you want to be a guest on Traumedy, I would love to have a conversation with you. Every Tuesday, a new episode of Traumedy. Traumedy. Remember, no matter what, keep laughing.